Welcome back, everyone, to the Elder Confessions channel. During dinner, my wife and my sister-in-law got into an argument. My mother slapped my wife, then told her to get out and go back to her parents. I immediately packed our things and took her away. The next day, she called me in a panic 66 times. That evening, I took my wife to my mother's house for dinner as usual. My family has a tradition of gathering once a month to keep us close and cheer up our parents. But for Javi, my wife, these meals have never been easy. She always prepares very thoughtfully, from a basket of fresh fruit to supplements for my parents. Yet, as soon as we stepped through the gate, I saw a hint of hesitation in her eyes. My mother, Mrs. Knock, was in the kitchen. As soon as she saw my brother Kwok Bao and sister-in-law Tui Trang walk in, her face lit up. Trang carried a small paper bag, her voice as sweet as honey. "Mom, I saw this scarf and thought it suited you so well, so I bought it for you. A friend brought it back for you. They're very expensive in stores." My mother picked up the thin silk scarf, stroked it, and beamed with joy. "Oh, my eldest daughter-in-law is always so thoughtful. It doesn't need to be expensive, it's the heart that counts." I stood by and glanced at the scarf. They sell those all over the night market. It probably doesn't cost much. But Trang has a way with words. Everything she says sounds fancy and precious. Meanwhile, Javi quietly placed the fruit basket and supplements on the table, saying softly, "I brought you some fruit and joint medicine. I heard Dad mention his knee pain the other day, so I bought a type that's easy to take." My mother just glanced at them and replied indifferently, "Fine, just leave them there. Don't bother next time. This house isn't lacking anything." I saw Javi's hand freeze for a moment. She bit her lip and bowed her head with a quiet, "Okay." It was just a small remark, but enough to make one feel hurt. I was about to speak up, but Javi tugged my sleeve, signaling me to stop. She's always like that, enduring things to keep the meal peaceful. But the more one endures, the easier it is for others to assume they don't feel any pain. The meal served was quite lavish. My mother sat at the head of the table, and my father, Mr. Lamb, sat next to her, as quiet as always. My brother Bao ate while talking about his business, using very impressive sounding language. He talked about big upcoming investments, financial friends asking for capital, and getting a new car by the end of the year. My mother's eyes lit up as she listened to her eldest son, nodding proudly from time to time. Trang sat next to my mother, serving food to Bao while skillfully chiming in. "Bao really loves you, Mom. He always says that when he has money, he'll renovate the kitchen for you and take you on vacation so you won't feel left out." My mother smiled with satisfaction and turned to look at Javi. That gaze wasn't harsh at first, but it was always cold, as if she were measuring to see if her youngest daughter-in-law measured up to the eldest. She picked up a nice piece of meat, put it in Bao's bowl, and then served some to Trang. When it came to Javi, she only said, "Eat, why are you just sitting there?" Javi nodded slightly. I put a piece of fish in my wife's bowl, trying to act as if I didn't notice, but the atmosphere at the table grew increasingly uncomfortable. Trang suddenly looked at my wife with a smirk. "V, you look a bit thin lately, don't you? Must be too stressed at work." But no matter what a woman does, she should also think about having children. "You've been married for almost 3 years now." Javi's hand holding her chopsticks froze for a moment. I looked up at Trang, but she remained as nonchalant as if she had just said something caring. My mother sighed immediately upon hearing this. "Your sister is right. Other families have grandchildren a year or two after the daughter-in-law arrives. But in this house, we keep waiting and waiting. I'm old now. I don't know if I'll ever get to hold my youngest grandchild." Javi tried to keep her voice calm. "Yes, we are currently planning for a baby. We've seen a doctor, and they told us to focus on our health and avoid too much pressure." Trang chuckled. "Doctors always say that, but if a woman is too focused on work, sometimes it ruins her chances of having children." I started to feel my face getting hot. "Trang, this is a private matter for us. Please don't talk like that." She immediately waved her hand. "Oh, come on, Koi, why so tense? I'm just saying this out of care. Besides, V should know that being a daughter-in-law isn't just about making money. You have to bear children and nurture your husband's home too." My mother set her bowl down, her tone growing heavier. "Your mother is right. A woman who can't have children, no matter how capable, will only bring coldness to the home." Javi lowered her head. I saw her eyes turn red, but she held back. At that moment, Tui Trang added one more light but venomous remark. Or maybe you're calculating too much, afraid that if you have kids, you won't have money left to send to your parents. The entire dinner table went completely silent. She hadn't just attacked Javi, she had insulted my wife's parents as well. Over the past years, Javi has never taken a single penny from my family. On the contrary, she and I regularly provide medicine, gifts, and living expenses for my parents. And the money she sends to her parents is her own earnings. Because her parents are old and frail, there's nothing there worth mocking. Javi slowly set her chopsticks down. For the first time in years, she looked directly at my sister-in-law. Her voice trembled, but was clear. If you have something to say it directly. Don't use my children or my parents as a target for your sarcasm. I've stayed silent not because I'm wrong, but because I wanted to maintain some respect for this meal. Tui Trang's face changed color immediately. My mother was stunned as well. Her eyes darkened. I knew that with just those words, the storm in this house had officially begun. After Javi's remark, it was as if someone had drained all the warmth from the dinner table. The ceiling fan turned slowly overhead, each rotation audible, and the clatter of bowls and chopsticks stopped completely. I looked at my wife and saw her sitting upright, her hands resting on her lap, trying to keep from trembling. But I knew that to say those words, she had to swallow years of hurt from being a daughter-in-law in my house. Tui Trang paused for only a few seconds, then quickly set her bowl down and dabbed at the corners of her eyes, even though no tears fell. Her voice choked up, just quiet enough to sound pathetic, yet loud enough for everyone in the house to hear every word. I was only trying to give her some advice so she could improve, mother. As a sister-in-law, if I see something wrong, I have the right to speak up. Yet she speaks to me like an outsider, as if I were intentionally trying to harm her. My mother's face instantly darkened. She has always favored Trang in a very peculiar way. As long as Trang smiles and flatters her, occasionally buying her a scarf, a shirt, or cheap boxes of snacks while claiming they are luxury goods. My mother believes that is filial piety, while she takes for granted all the medicine, utility bills, and thoughtful gifts that Javi quietly provides. She slammed her chopsticks down on the tray and stared straight at my wife. Javi, is that any way for you to talk? When your sister-in-law offers advice, you should learn to accept it. As the youngest daughter-in-law, you get defensive at the slightest thing. Do you want everyone to think this family doesn't know how to raise a daughter-in-law? I couldn't hold it in any longer. Mom, Trang started it. She brought up our children and insulted V's parents. V was just defending herself. My mother snapped her head toward me, her eyes filled with anger and disappointment as if I had committed a grave sin. Oh, so now I'm not even allowed to say a word, is that it? Once you get married, you forget your mother and your siblings. I'm not even dead yet, and you're already defending your wife so blindly. After I'm gone, I suppose you'll let your wife decide everything. Her words made my heart ache. Elders in the family are often very skilled at using filial piety as a noose around their children's necks. As soon as you refuse to accept a wrong, you are immediately labeled unfilial. I was about to continue, but my brother set his glass down, cleared his throat, and interrupted. Koi, I'm telling you, don't let a woman lead you around by the nose. Every family has its hierarchy. If a woman in the house doesn't know how to endure, how can she maintain the family's blessings? To talk back to your mother and your sister like that, it's just chaos. I looked at my brother. He spoke his morals so perfectly, his tone always sounding like a man of great experience. Yet, for years, whenever mom and dad were sick, they called me. I paid for their medicine, and whenever the pump broke, I was the one who fixed it. At the end of the month, when they're short on living expenses, it's also my wife and I who send the money. As for you, you're only good at sitting at the dinner table bragging about big business deals, saying things to make my mother look good to our relatives. Javi looked up then, her voice trembling but every word still clear. I can endure it when you call me clumsy or say I'm too quiet. I can also endure it when Trang says I don't know how to please my husband's family. But the matter of children is a private pain for my husband and me. My parents in the countryside have done nothing wrong to be brought up for mockery. I cannot stay silent forever. Tui Trang seemed to be waiting just for that. She immediately turned to my mother, her voice significantly higher. Do you see that, Mom? The youngest daughter-in-law is quite something now. At the slightest thing, she brings up her parents and talks as if the whole family is bullying her. I'm telling you, you're too kind, which is why people disrespect you. My mother's face flushed red. She stood up abruptly. The wooden chair behind her was pushed back, screeching loudly. My father, who had been silent the whole time, softly called out, "Knock, stop. We're in the middle of a meal." But my mother brushed him off immediately. You be quiet. It's precisely because you're always silent that this house has someone who doesn't know their place. Then she pointed directly at Javi's face, her voice heavy like stone hitting the floor. Quote, let me tell you this. A woman with little fortune must know how to bow her head. You haven't even given birth to a child for your husband's family, and yet you're being defiant and daring to talk back to your mother-in-law. Do you think because Khối takes your side, you can say whatever you want? Javi choked back tears. I saw her lips turn pale, but she still didn't bow her head. She looked at my mother, her eyes welling up, yet her voice remained respectful. I respect you, Mom, but I won't accept being insulted like this forever. I am a daughter-in-law, not someone for the whole family to vent their anger on. The moment she finished, my mother lunged forward so quickly that I couldn't reach out to stop her. A sharp slap rang out, dry and crisp, in the dining room. Javi staggered to one side, clutching her cheek. A red mark appeared on her face, her lip bitten until it bled, and the whole room went dead silent. I stood up abruptly, and in that moment, my ears began to ring. I could no longer hear my mother's heavy breathing, Thuy Trang's fake panic tone, nor did I see the meal in front of me. I could only watch as my wife, the woman who had endured so much for my sake, was struck by my own mother right before my eyes. My mother didn't stop there. She spat out every word. Get out and go back to your parents. This house doesn't harbor daughters-in-law who dare talk back. Javi stood still, tears falling, but she didn't let out a sob. She just turned to look at me, and that gaze hurt more than any reproach could. It didn't ask who I would choose. It only seemed to ask if she still had to endure anything else today. I stepped forward to pull Javi toward me, shielding her behind my back. My hand grasped her freezing cold hand. I looked at my mother, then at Bao, then at Trang, and spoke very slowly, each word hitting the floor like a nail. Quote, you just hit my wife in front of me, and from this moment on, I will not let her stay here for even one more minute. My mother looked at me as if she couldn't believe her own ears. Perhaps she thought that statement was just an impulsive outburst from an angry son. She curled her lip, her voice as sharp as a blade. Quote, fine, leave then, if you're so capable. I want to see how long you two last outside this house. Don't think a little paycheck gives you the right to act big with me. I didn't answer those words. If it were before, I would have tried to explain, tried to make Mom understand that I never held anything back from my parents. But that night, I suddenly understood one thing. Some people won't listen to the truth when they still prefer to believe flattery. The more I argued, the more Javi would be dragged into another cycle of hurt. Thuy Trang sat next to my mother, bowing her head as if in fear. But in the moment I turned toward her, I clearly saw the corner of her mouth twitch slightly upward. That smile was so quick that if you weren't paying attention, you'd think you imagined it. It looked like the smile of someone who had just pushed a thorn out of their side. As for Bao, he slammed his hand onto the table, making the wine slosh out onto the wood. Quote, Khối, you're taking this too far. It's just women arguing. Mom got heated and slapped her to set her straight. There's no reason for you to turn this into a major crisis. A man should know how to keep the peace at home, not pack up and leave just because his wife cries a little. I turned to look at him. You call slapping my wife in the face just a domestic matter? He faltered but still tried to raise his voice. So what do you want? Make Mom apologize to her? Mom gave birth to you. She raised you this big, and now you intend to embarrass her in front of the whole family because of your wife? I didn't answer anymore. I just turned to Javi. Her cheek was still bright red, a tiny streak of blood at the corner of her lip. I took a tissue from the table and gently wiped it for my wife. She looked at me, tears welling up, but her voice was very soft. I'm sorry, I've put you in a difficult position. That sentence made my heart ache. She was the one insulted and struck. Yet the first thing she thought of was my difficulty. I held her hand tightly, trying to keep my voice from trembling. You are not the one who needs to apologize. After saying that, I pulled Javi up and guided her out of the dining room. Behind me, Mom was still scolding. She called me unfilial, said I was manipulated by my wife, and that a man led by a woman would never amount to anything. Those words fell behind me like heavy stones. But this time, I didn't turn back to pick them up. I went straight into the small room at the end of the hall, where Mom kept a place for us to stay whenever we visited. The room wasn't large, just a wooden bed, an old wardrobe, and a small desk. Javi stood at the door, hugging her elbows, her face pale from both hurt and pain. I opened the closet, took the gray suitcase from the top shelf, and started packing. I put in a few sets of our clothes, personal documents, laptops, phone chargers, and the bag of stomach and allergy medication for Javi. She often suffers from weather allergies. Every time the environment changes, she breaks out in red rashes. My mother never remembers such small things, and Sister Trang doesn't care either. But to me, those are things that cannot be forgotten, because it concerns the woman I promised to take care of for the rest of my life. Outside the door, my mother's voice still echoed harshly. Pack up, get everything out. Once you leave, don't come back crying. I'm telling you now, in this house, a daughter-in-law won't be begged to return after talking back. Javi tugged my arm gently. Maybe we should just go. Let's not take too much. I don't want to upset Mom further. I looked at her and shook my head. We aren't fleeing in a panic, we are leaving with dignity. We'll take what we need, and truths will come to light later. As I went to the living room to grab the folder from the drawer, I suddenly spotted a familiar envelope. It was a pale yellow envelope, the kind I always used to give my mother cash whenever I visited. My date was still written in the corner, but someone had added a line in red ink on the front. Trang's money to buy Mom's water purifier. I froze, a lump forming in my throat. Just last month, I gave Mom that money, telling her to buy a high-quality water purifier if she wanted to replace the old one. Don't skimp on it. Yet now, that money had become Thuy Trang's accomplishment. I looked toward the dining room, where she was still sitting beside my mother like a dutiful daughter-in-law, and my heart turned cold. Many past events suddenly came back to me. The times I sent money to fix the kitchen, Mom would brag to relatives that it was Bao. The medicine boxes Javi bought, Mom said it was Trang who knew how to care for her. Those days my wife quietly scheduled doctor appointments for Dad. Mom would praise the eldest daughter-in-law for being quick and helpful. Perhaps we haven't just been overlooked all this time. Perhaps the things we did had their credit stolen by someone else. I quietly pulled out my phone and took a picture of the envelope. Javi saw it, her eyes flashing with surprise, but I signaled for her to stay silent. Now is not the time to drag everything out into an argument. Once someone is intoxicated by bias, a few words of explanation are just like wind blowing through a crack in the door. As I pulled my suitcase out to the hallway, my father was standing there. I don't know how long he'd been there. Mr. Lamb was still wearing his old sweater, hands behind his back, his eyes heavy. He didn't blame me, nor did he defend my mother. That silence made me sadder than any scolding could have. Dad looked at Javi and then at me, his voice hoarse. Koi, take your wife and leave first. Let my tin handle whatever happens. I looked at my father for a long time. In those words, I heard much more than just a piece of advice. Dad knows this house has issues, knows Mom is biased, and knows Javi is suffering. But just like so many times before, he chose silence to avoid the storm. It's just a pity that some waves, if dodged forever, will eventually wash away the entire roof. I nodded and pulled the suitcase to the door. Javi walked beside me, her steps light yet heavy as stone. Behind my back, my mother was still screaming, "If you leave, don't you ever show your face here again. I will consider as if I never had this daughter-in-law." I stopped at the threshold and turned to look at my mother. She stood in the middle of the living room, face flushed red, one hand on her hip. Beside her, Thuy Trang was pretending to bow her head and wipe away tears. I was no longer loudly angry. In my heart at that moment, there was only a distinct coldness. "Don't worry, Mom," I said slowly. "I am leaving this time so that you will understand who truly cares for you." After saying that, I took Javi's hand and walked outside. The door closed behind us, shutting the shouting inside the house that had long been rotting away. Outside in the yard, it started to drizzle. It wasn't a heavy downpour, but a cold, thin, lingering mist that made the road glimmer under the yellow lights. I opened the trunk, put the suitcase inside, then turned to help Javi into the back seat. She said nothing, just pulled up her collar, one hand clutching the cheek that had been slapped, the other wrapping around my waist as I started the engine. The road from my mother's house to our small apartment wasn't far, yet that night it felt strangely long. On both sides of the road, most shops were closed, with only a few late-night stalls casting flickering light. I drove slower than usual, not because of the rain, but because I could clearly feel the person behind me trembling. I didn't know if it was from the cold, the pain, or the grievances she had just had to swallow. I didn't take Javi to her parents' house. At that moment, I knew if her parents saw their daughter beaten until her lip bled, everything would explode that very night. He says he loves his child, so he would surely be heartbroken, angry, and might even take a bus to my mother's house to demand an explanation. I don't want one mistake to lead to further unnecessary conflict. I just want to get my wife to a safe place first. Our small apartment is near work. We've rented it for over a year. It's not spacious, just a living room, a bedroom, and a tiny kitchen. But it's the place where Javi can breathe the most easily. Here, there are no judgmental glares from my mother, no sugary sweet voice from Thuy Trang, and no bombastic business stories from Bao. As soon as we entered, I turned on the lights, set the suitcase by the chair, and went straight to the kitchen to wrap some ice in a clean towel. Javi sat on the edge of the sofa, her hair slightly messy from the rain, her left cheek already swollen and red. I sat down in front of her, gently pressing the cold towel to my wife's cheek. She shuddered slightly. I asked softly, "Does it hurt a lot?" Javi shook her head, but tears began to fall. She didn't cry aloud, just let the tears stream down to her chin. Each drop fell silently, as if she had been holding it back for too long. I put the towel down and reached out to wipe her tears away. She suddenly grabbed my hand, her voice choking up. I can endure my mother-in-law not liking me, and I can deal with Trang's prying and snide remarks, but what I fear most is you being caught in the middle because of me. I don't want you to be labeled unfilial. Hearing that, my heart felt heavy. The woman who was beaten was her, the one kicked out of the house was also her. Yet, the thing she worries about is still me. I pulled her into my arms and said slowly, "I am not choosing to abandon my mother. I am simply choosing not to let wrongdoings continue to be called filial piety. If I stay silent today, my mother might hit you again, Trang might insult you 10 more times, and I would become the type of husband who just stands by and watches his wife suffer." Javi hugged me tightly, and this time she truly broke down. Her sobs were quiet, but they sounded incredibly heartbreaking. I let her cry for a while, then fixed her a glass of warm water and gently dabbed antiseptic on the cut at the corner of her mouth. She was exhausted, so she leaned back against the chair for a moment and then drifted off to sleep on the sofa. I covered my wife with a thin blanket, adjusting the pillow to make her more comfortable. The house went quiet again, with only the sound of rain tapping against the balcony. I sat at the dining table, opened my phone, and kept picturing the envelope marked "money to buy a water filter for mom." It was just a small detail, but it felt like a thorn stuck in my throat that I couldn't swallow. I opened my banking app and scrolled through the transfer history of the last 2 years. Every single transaction appeared clearly. Every month, I sent money to mom, sometimes 5 million, sometimes 7 million. There was a month when dad's leg hurt, so I sent an extra 15 million for mom to take him to the doctor. During the holidays, Javi even reminded me to send it early, fearing mom might need to shop. The total amount wasn't small at all. Yet, during family dinners, mom would still say that Bao and Trang knew how to take care of them, while my wife and I only lived for our own comfort. I used to think mom was just getting old and said those things to favor the eldest. But now, looking at the cold numbers on the screen and remembering the mislabeled envelope, I started to feel something was wrong. I took screenshots of several important transactions and saved them in a separate folder. Right at that moment, my phone suddenly vibrated. A message from an unknown number appeared on the screen, with just one sentence. "Khối, watch out for Bao and Trang. They are dragging your mother into a huge debt." I sat up straight, my heart beating faster. I immediately called the number back, but the other end just rang and then disconnected. I called again, but still, no one answered. Javi stirred slightly on the sofa. I quickly turned down the volume and stepped toward the balcony. A few minutes later, the unknown number sent a photo, a screenshot of a chat group with a flashy name, Internal Market Growth. In the group, I saw Bao's account name and another account using Thuy Trang's profile picture. The lines of messages flashing before my eyes sent a chill down my spine. Quote, "Put more in to recover, borrow the savings book temporarily. Can your mom sign the guarantee? Don't let Khối know." I zoomed in on the photo to read every word. "The slap tonight. Thuy Trang's gloating. The way my mother blindly defends her. Everything is suddenly no longer just a mother-in-law and daughter-in-law issue. Perhaps behind the cheap gifts and sweet flattery is a financial trap set long ago. And my mother, out of pride and bias, is likely being pushed into the abyss by the very person she trusts most." I turn back to look at Javi, who has fallen asleep, her cheek still swollen. My heart aches for my wife while I feel a chill, sensing another storm approaching. I turn off my phone screen, telling myself I will check everything clearly tomorrow morning. This time, I'm not returning to argue. I am returning to find the truth. I don't know when I actually fell asleep. Perhaps it was near dawn, as the rain on the balcony began to fade, and Javi, exhausted after a long night, finally lay still in bed. But that sleep was not deep. The message from the strange number kept haunting my mind. The lines of text in the internal growth group, the envelope with the credit name changed. Everything feels like shards of broken glass cutting into me piece by piece. The next morning, I jolted awake because my phone was vibrating constantly on the table. At first, I thought it was an alarm, but as I reached for it, the screen was glowing white with a flood of missed calls. The word "Mom" appeared densely all over. 23 calls. Before I could even fully sit up, the phone vibrated again. The 24th, then 25, 26. I stared at the screen for a long time without answering. If Mom just wanted to scold me for being unfilial or force me to bring Javi back to apologize, she would have called once or twice and sent harsh messages. But calling so persistently, this early in the morning, is definitely not normal. I suddenly felt a heavy weight in my chest, as if last night's storm was just the first gust of wind. Javi woke up too. She sat up, her hair messy, and the slapped side of her face had bruised into a reddish-purple mark. Seeing my phone vibrating nonstop, she asked softly, "Is Mom calling? Is something wrong?" I shook my head, "I don't know yet." Only when the number of missed calls reached 40, then 50, did I take a deep breath. I didn't want to answer while being swept away by my emotions. I placed the phone on the table, turned on the speakerphone so Javi could hear, and pressed redial. The phone only rang once before the other end picked up. But my mother's voice was no longer the shouting tone from last night, no longer the icy voice that had driven my wife away. Her voice broke, hoarse and lost from crying. "Koi, please come home right now. Our family has been cheated, son. I'm going to die from this." I closed my eyes for a second, trying to keep my voice calm. "Mom, explain clearly, what happened?" My mother sobbed, and I could hear noise in the background, my father shouting at someone, and things clattering around chaotically. My mother stammered, as if she herself couldn't believe what was happening in our house. "Some people came to the house this morning to collect Bayo's debt. They said if they don't get the money today, they'll make a scene and seize the house." "Oh Koi, how did it come to this?" I gripped the phone tightly. "How much is the debt?" There was silence on the other end for a few seconds. My mother spoke very quietly, so low that her words were almost swallowed by her sobbing. "Over $1 billion, including late fees. They said it's nearly $1.5 billion. Javi sat beside me, stunned, and even though I had read the warning message last night, I felt a chill in my chest. Bao, who talked about investing every night, about changing cars, talking as if money was in the palm of his hand, turned out to be drowning in debt. I asked further, "Why is he in debt?" My mother cried louder. "He said it was some stock market investment. At first, it was real profit. He bragged to Mom about making tens of millions in a few days. Then Tui Trang said this opportunity was very rare. If we had a large capital, the whole family would change their lives by the end of the year. And Mom believed it too." When I heard the name Tui Trang, my heart sank. Javi lowered her head, her hands clasped tightly together. She said nothing, but her gaze had turned very cold. My mother continued to recount between sobs. It turned out that for months, Tui Trang had been taking money from Mom under the guise of buying supplements, water purifiers, kitchen repairs, and replacing home appliances. Some she gave in cash, some she withdrew from her savings account. Tui Trang sweet-talked her, saying it was to make our home look decent, so when a grandchild came, everything would be clean and complete. She believed her because she was always so, mother and daughter, sweet, or even worse. My older brother and his wife even tricked my mother into signing some guarantee papers. They said it was just asset verification to borrow money for a few days. Once the stocks went up, the money would return instantly, covering the debt and making a profit. My mother is old and doesn't understand those things. Seeing my eldest son and daughter-in-law speak with such certainty, she signed them. Now people are coming to the house with papers signed by my mother, threatening to seize the house registered in my parents' names if she doesn't pay. My mother said while crying, "I thought she really cared for me." Tui Trang kept saying that when she had money, she would take me on vacation, buy me a gold necklace, and give me a cute grandson. She said V wasn't clever, didn't know how to please others, and that she was the one who truly cared for her in-laws. I was so foolish, my child. I turned to look at Javi. She still sat there silently, her face pale, the cheek she was slapped on still swollen, and a small cut on the corner of her lip. The person my mother kicked out of the house last night. This morning, she has to hear my mother admit she was fooled by the same words used to belittle her. I kept silent for a few seconds, then spoke slowly. Last night you slapped my wife and chased her back to her parents. Today you call me home to save the house. Do you feel bitter now? The other end of the line went silent, then my mother burst into tears. That cry was no longer the type meant to overwhelm others like before. It was the cry of someone who had just been slapped in the face by the truth. I was wrong, Koi. I was wrong to V. Can you let me talk to her? I beg her. I apologize to her. Javi looked up at me. In her eyes, there was pain, but no gloating. I understand my wife. She might be deeply hurt, but she has never been the type to enjoy seeing others kneel to feel like a winner. I didn't hand over the phone right away. I just said to my mother, now is not the time for tears and apologies. I will come home. But I'm not coming home to listen to your sob stories, nor to pay anyone's debts. I'm coming back to clear up who turned this whole family into prey. My mother choked up, calling my name several times. I hung up the phone and stood up to get my coat. Javi also slowly stepped out of bed. I turned back to look at my wife. You don't have to go back if you're not ready. She was silent for a moment, then shook her head. I will go with you. Not because I'm no longer hurt, but because I want to know how they won Mom over to make her hate me so much. I looked at Javi, feeling both pity and admiration. This time I am bringing my wife back to that house, but she is no longer the daughter-in-law who must leave with her head bowed in humiliation. She will return with me. With the composure of someone holding the key to the entire truth about Bao and Tui Trang. I locked the apartment door and turned to look at Javi once more. There was still a faint bruise on her cheek, her hair was tied neatly back, and her face was pale from having barely slept last night. I know there is still so much hurt in her heart. Someone who was just kicked out of their in-laws' home, returning there after just one night. Without enough courage, it would be hard to even step through that gate. I told my wife that this time she wouldn't have to bow her head to apologize to anyone. We are returning to see the truth clearly. If you feel tired, just stand behind me, and if anyone insults you again, I will take you away immediately. Javi was silent for a few seconds, then nodded. I'm not afraid to go back. I'm only afraid your mother still won't wake up. But if we don't go, she might be led even further astray by them. That statement made me feel both love and respect for my wife. Even at this point, she still didn't think about retaliating against my mother. She only wanted the truth to be exposed so that an elderly person wouldn't continue to be used. I held her hand tightly and we got out of the car. When we arrived, as soon as Mom stopped the car at the gate, I noticed something unusual. At the gate stood two strangers smoking. One wore a black jacket with tattoos on his wrists, the other kept looking into the yard while using his phone. Seeing me step out, they scanned me from head to toe with hostile glares. I asked, "Who are you looking for?" The man in black exhaled smoke and gave a cold laugh. "Looking for someone who knows how to pay up. You're the youngest son of this house, aren't you? Go in and convince your mother and brother. Don't make us have to keep coming back." I didn't answer, simply leading Javi straight inside. The yard, usually kept clean, was in shambles this morning. A plastic chair was overturned, some photocopied papers lay on the tiles, and the bonsai pot my mother cherished was shoved to one side. The living room door was wide open. From outside the door, I could already hear my mother sobbing. Mrs. Knox sat slumped on the floor, her hair disheveled, her face pale as if she had aged 10 years in just one night. The woman who, just last night, stood tall to chase my wife back to her parents' house was now trembling, clutching her chest, her eyes swollen from crying. As soon as she saw me, she braced herself to stand, stumbling toward me to grab my hand. "Koi, please, you have to save me, my child. I've truly been cheated by them." They came right to the house, threatening to take it and making a scene for the whole neighborhood to see. "What am I supposed to do now, my child?" I didn't push her hand away, but I didn't hug her like I had in the past. There are times when I love my mother, but she still has to see the consequences of her own favoritism. I looked her straight in the eyes and asked, word by word, "Do you want me to save you, or do you want me to keep being a debt-paying machine for your oldest son and daughter-in-law?" My mother froze, her hand, which had been clutching mine, slowly went limp. She bowed her head, her lips trembling, unable to say a word. Perhaps it was the first time she had heard me speak so bluntly, and perhaps the first time she realized the youngest son she thought was gentle and easily led no longer wanted to silently carry the burden of other people's mistakes. At that exact moment, Thuy Trang stepped out from the kitchen, still in her house dress, her hair clipped neatly, her face trying to maintain a calm expression. If you didn't see her eyes darting around constantly, an outsider might have thought she was just another confused victim. "It's a good thing you're home, Khoi," she said, her voice softening. "Family matters should be handled behind closed doors. Mom is already terrified, don't say anything else to upset her." Javi stood behind me without a word, but Thuy Trang wouldn't miss the chance. She glanced at my wife, her lips curling up. "Sister-in-law, were you scolded by Mom yesterday, yet here you are today just to watch the chaos? The house is in turmoil, don't make things any more tense." I spun around, and the room immediately went silent. I looked at Thuy Trang, my voice low but very clear. "If you say one more word to insult my wife, I will walk out right now. Whether this house sinks or swims, you handle it yourself." Thuy Trang was stunned. My mother looked up at me as well. For the first time, she turned to snap at her in a truly irritated tone. "Shut up. I'm stressed enough as it is, don't add to it." That shout wasn't as loud as when Mom scolded Javi last night, but to me, it felt like the first crack in the wall of bias she had built for years. Thuy Trang pursed her lips, her gaze turning cold, but she didn't dare react. From the stairs, my brother Bao walked down. He wore a wrinkled shirt, his hair was messy, and he still tried to keep his familiar carefree look. Seeing me, he forced a smile. "Khoi, don't listen to outsiders' threats. It's just a temporary investment snag. In a few days, when the money comes in, I'll handle it." I stared at him for a long time. If you can handle it, why have people been standing outside the gate since morning? If it's just a temporary snag, why did Mom call me 66 times? Bao's face stiffened, and he looked away. "You don't understand how investing works. Market fluctuations are normal." I placed my phone on the table, opened the folder of screenshots from last night, and said, "I don't need to understand the market. I need to understand where the loan papers are, which apps you borrowed from, which mortgage contracts, and where the money went. Show me everything." Thuy Trang immediately flared up. "You're our younger brother, are you trying to interrogate us like criminals? This family is humiliated enough. Do you want to expose us for the whole world to laugh at?" I looked at her, then at Bao, who had gone pale. This time, I am no longer the polite younger brother, nor the son who stays silent out of fear of upsetting his mother. "No one interrogates an innocent person," I said, "only those with secrets to hide or afraid of paperwork." Bao hung his head. Thuy Trang clenched her hands tightly. I knew from that moment, the flashy facade that the two of them tried to paint before my mother began to peel away. I would not let the conversation drift into more excuses. If I let Bao and Thuy Trang keep going in circles, my mother would eventually soften, my father would stay silent, and the truth would be buried under a pile of plausible excuses. I took my phone and called Quan, an old friend who used to be a personal financial advisor for many small businesses. He wasn't a legal expert, but he was sharp enough to spot suspicious loans and investment promises that were nothing but traps. Over 30 minutes later, Quan arrived. Just as he stepped inside, he glanced at the papers on the table, then scanned everyone's faces. He didn't ask personal questions, just spoke briefly. "Whoever has phones, loan papers, or trading accounts, put them all on the table. If we don't know the cash flow, we can't save anything." Bao immediately frowned. "This is my family matter. What can an outsider do?" I looked at him, my voice low but firm. "You've hidden it long enough. Now that people are at the gate demanding to seize our parents' house, are you still afraid of outsiders knowing?" Outside, two strange men pounded hard on the iron gate again. The metallic clanging rang out harshly in the morning air. My mother jumped and clutched her chest, while my father hurried to look through the door gap and then turned back, his face ashen. That threat made the last bit of Bao's pride crumble. With trembling hands, he took his phone and placed it on the table. Quan opened each app and every chat group. The more he saw, the sterner his face became. On Bao's phone, there were dozens of groups with flashy names like Hot Stock Hunters, Internal Profits, or VIP Growth Rooms, each message using words to bait greed and urge more deposits to recover losses. A once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, Don't be late or you'll miss out. Some parts even promised 30% monthly returns. Absurd at first glance, but to someone dreaming of getting rich quick, it sounded as sweet as honey. My mother stood behind us, trembling more and more as she listened. She stammered, "You told me it was just a small contribution, so why are there so many groups?" Bao lowered his head, his shoulders slumped. "It was profitable at first, Mom. I put in 20, and a few days later, it returned 26. I thought I knew how to make money. Friends kept telling me to go big. The more I invested, the higher the returns." Quan sighed, "That's their trap. Letting people win a few times to build trust, dragging them in deeper, then when they lose, inciting them to borrow more to recover. The more you try to recover, the more you get stuck." Javi stood beside me, silently recording the dates and amounts on paper. She didn't interrupt, but every line she wrote felt like a knife cutting through my brother and sister-in-law's web of lies. When we reached the transaction section, we discovered Bao hadn't just used his own money. He had borrowed from many sources, used apps, borrowed from acquaintances, and used my mother's name as a guarantor for several loans. My mother gripped the edge of the table. "I didn't sign anything. I only signed the papers Trang gave me. She said they were just certificates for household investment to lower the interest rates." Tui Trang immediately interjected, "Mom, you're being unfair to me. I only gave you the papers to look at. You agreed to it, so you signed it. I didn't force you." I turned to look at my sister-in-law. "Can you clarify if my mother read all the content before signing?" Tui Trang hesitated, then retorted stiffly, "Mom is old, but she's still sharp. Don't talk as if she was completely deceived." My mother looked at Tui Trang, her eyes turning red. For the first time, there was no absolute trust in her gaze, but a very clear trace of suspicion. She asked softly, "Trang, you told me to sign to lower the interest for Bao. You said in a few days the money would come back and it would be over. Why are they saying I'm the guarantor for these loans now?" Tui Trang pursed her lips and turned away. I only heard what Bao said too. Before I could speak, Javi placed her phone on the table. On the screen was the history of my transfers to Mom and the photos I took of the envelope last night. She said very gently, "Mom, I don't want to bring this up to take credit, but if I don't clarify, you'll keep thinking many things were taken care of by Trang." I followed up on my wife's words, opening up the old transactions. The day I sent money to my mother to buy a water purifier. The very next day, Tui Trang posted a photo showing off the new machine she chose for Mom. The day Javi ordered a bottle of joint supplements. A few days later, my mother told the neighbors that her eldest daughter-in-law knew how to care for her. Even the scarf she gave yesterday. In a chat group with friends, she bragged about buying it at a discount stall, but told Mom it was imported. My mother stood there, stunned. She turned to look at Tui Trang, her voice trembling. "So, the things you bought for me were paid for by Khối and V?" Tui Trang still refused to back down. She shrugged, her voice cold, saying money entering this house is communal money. I took the effort to choose the gifts. As long as you're happy, that's enough. Are we now going to divide who pays and who chooses the model for a water purifier? That sentence felt like a second slap, but this one hit my mother directly. She took a step back, her lips trembling. The person she once defended, once considered clever and filial, turned out to be just using others' money to build her own reputation. Right at that moment, there was a loud thud at the gate, and a stack of photocopied papers flew into the yard, scattering before the doorstep. My father picked them up, and his face turned pale the moment he saw them. They were photocopies of loan documents with my mother's signature, Bao's fingerprint, and a dense table of accrued interest penalties. The total amount, once added up, was nearly 1.5 billion Vietnamese dongs. My mother couldn't stand, collapsing heavily into a chair. My father held the stack of papers, his hands shaking violently. He looked at Bao for a long time before choking out, "You've killed your mother, Bao. You aren't poor because you lost money, you're poor because of your vanity." That sentence left the whole room deathly silent. Bao hung his head, no longer having any flowery excuses left. As for Tui Trang, for the first time her eyes lacked their smugness, but I knew someone like her wouldn't give up easily. When the truth is dragged into the light, manipulative people rarely repent immediately. They will find ways to shift the blame, and the real storm. I had a premonition that it had only just begun. The silence in the living room stretched on, becoming suffocating. The stack of loan papers lay on the table like a death sentence, while my mother sat frozen, clutching her chest with both hands. Bao hung his head, looking nothing like his usual boastful self for the first time. Only Tui Trang regained her composure the fastest. I saw her eyes shift from panic to coldness, as if she were calculating how to escape. She pulled out a chair, took a deep breath, and spoke, her voice no longer sweet as before. Let me be clear, Bao took out these loans himself, and Mother signed the papers too. As a wife, I just did whatever my husband told me to do. Don't look at me now as if I'm the one who caused all of this. Bao snapped his head up. Trang, what are you saying? You are the one who told me to put more in to recover losses. You are the one who told Mother to release her savings book. You said we just needed to turn it around for a few days. Tui Trang turned to glare at her husband. You're a man. You make your own decisions. Did I hold your hand to click the button? Did I force the pen into Mother's hand to make her sign? Don't blame your wife just because you lost money. That sentence left Bao stunned, as if he had just been slapped. The woman who once sat beside him talking about changing their lives, getting rich, and proving to the family how capable they were, now wipes it all away as easily as brushing dust off a sleeve. I saw his face go pale, his lips trembling, but no words came out. Tui Trang didn't stop there. She turned to Ha Vi, her eyes sharpening. And you too, Vi. I've known you haven't liked me for a long time. Mother loves me, and that bothers you, doesn't it? Now that there's a little trouble, you drag out bank transfers and envelopes just to smear my reputation. You're really something, acting innocent but being so calculating. Ha Vi stood beside me, her face still showing bruises, but her eyes were unusually calm. She didn't get angry, nor did she rush to defend herself. She just looked at Tui Trang and spoke slowly. I don't need to make anything up. The one making things up is the person who claimed market scarves were imported, and called my husband's money her own act of filial piety. You took credit for someone else's work to win Mother's heart, and now you say I'm smearing you? The words weren't loud, but they were sharp enough to make the whole room fall silent. Tui Trang opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. The evidence lay right there on the table. Even if she wanted to play a part, there was no stage left for her. Seeing that reasoning didn't work, she immediately switched tactics. Tui Trang clutched her stomach, grimaced, and slumped into a chair. I'm so exhausted. Everyone please stop pressuring me. The whole family is ganging up to bully one woman. Don't you find that excessive? I am a daughter-in-law in this house too. I haven't even had a comfortable life yet. Seeing her clutch her stomach, my mother instinctively moved to help, but my father, who had been silent until now, suddenly growled, if you keep pitying the wrong person, we'll actually lose this house. My mother froze. Dad's words seemed to put an end to her last bit of softness. I saw her pull her hand back, tears welling up again. But this time she didn't rush to Tui Trang. She just sat on the nearest chair, like someone who had just realized misplaced kindness could turn into a disaster. I pulled a stack of white paper from the drawer of the table in the living room. Now, whoever borrowed, signed, received, or transferred money, write it all down. No need to argue anymore. We'll draft a family record first, then depending on the severity, we'll involve professionals. Tui Trang reacted immediately. Do you think you're an investigative agency? A family and you want minutes, signatures? You want to push your brother and me into a corner, don't you? I looked straight at her. Whoever paved the way to that corner knows it themselves. As for the written record, it's so that from now on, no one can use tears instead of the truth. Brother Bao held the pen, trembling. He wrote a few lines before his hand stopped, while Tui Trang refused to touch the pen. While everyone was focused on the paper, Ha Vi suddenly touched my hand. I followed her gaze. Tui Trang was bent over, texting rapidly, thinking no one noticed. The phone screen lit up with a short message, but it was enough to send a chill down my spine. Did you get the red book tonight? I immediately stepped forward. Tui Trang was startled, flipped the phone over, and her face went pale. I asked directly, which red book? The whole room went dead silent. My mother looked up, her eyes wide with panic. My father also stood up abruptly. I turned to my mother, where is our house's red book? My mother stuttered, her face deathly pale. Yesterday, Trang said she needed to borrow it to take photos for asset verification. She claimed it was to get the lenders to lower the interest rate. She promised she would only photograph it and then put it back in the cabinet. I didn't wait for Mom to finish, walking straight to the inner room to open the wooden cabinet where my parents kept important documents. It was empty. The brown envelope containing the land title was no longer there. I turned back to the living room and looked at Tui Trang. At this moment, she couldn't pretend to be tired anymore. Her eyes darted continuously toward the door. My father braced his hands on the table. His voice was raspy. Trang, where is the land title? Tui Trang jumped to her feet. I don't know. Mom gave it to me to photograph. I must have left it somewhere in the room. Don't you all try to frame me." After saying that, she suddenly dashed toward the gate, but Javi was a step faster, blocking the living room door. My wife didn't shout. She stood tall with a firm voice. "You can go wherever you want, but the land title must stay here." Tui Trang gritted her teeth, her face twisted in anger. "Move aside. Do you think you're special just because your husband takes your side? This is my family's business. Don't you dare interfere." I was just about to step forward when my mother suddenly stood up. She couldn't walk steadily, yet she still pulled Javi behind her. The mother who had slapped my wife and kicked her out last night now stood shielding her youngest daughter-in-law, her body trembling but her voice strangely resolute. "Anyone who touches V will have to step over my dead body first." Those words rang out in the midst of the chaotic room. Javi stood behind my mother with teary eyes, while I looked at Mom, my heart aching. Some realizations come late, but if they are genuine, they can still salvage the humanity in a collapsing home. My mother's words made the entire room fall silent. The breeze from the yard blew through the door gap, making the loan papers on the table rustle, sounding like someone flipping through every mistake made in this house. Javi stood behind my mother with red-rimmed eyes. Perhaps even she did not expect the person who slapped her last night to be standing in her defense this morning. Tui Trang was even more shocked. She stared at my mother, her face distorted with rage. The sweet, sensible daughter-in-law facade Thou Heen had worn for years fell away in an instant. She smirked, her voice dripping with spite. "You're truly something, Mother. Just yesterday you said V was worthless, and today you're defending her? Have you gone senile in your old age, or have you been played for a fool by her and Uncle Koi?" My mother trembled. But this time she didn't shrink away. She turned to look at Tui Trang, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. These were no longer tears of fear from creditors, nor were they the manipulative tears she used when she wanted her stepchildren to obey. These were the tears of someone who had just witnessed their own foolishness. She choked on every word as if cutting into her own heart. "I was a fool for your sweet words. I slapped the one who cared for me and embraced the one gutting my family. I was truly blind, but I'm not so blind that I'd still defend you while watching you harm my daughter-in-law right in front of me." Javi went still. Her tears fell, but she remained composed. I knew that apology wasn't enough to erase last night's slap, nor to make up for years of being belittled. But at least it was the first time my mother correctly identified her own mistakes. For someone who spent her life using pride as armor, saying those words meant stripping away her own arrogance. Bao seemed unable to stand upright any longer. He slumped into a chair, clutching his head in his hands. The brother who used to beat his chest, boasting he knew business, investments, and how to secure our future. Now, before us stood only a man broken by greed and vanity. He spoke in a whisper. "At first, it's true, my friend invited me. He said there was an insider group that knew which stocks would rise. I put in a little money. It actually profited. I thought I'd hit my stride, thought that if I went bigger, I could upgrade the car and buy a house to make Mom proud." My father stood nearby, eyes reddened, but he didn't interrupt. Bao continued, his voice cracking, "And then he lost. The more I lost, the less I dared to say. Trang said if you lose, you have to win it back, otherwise you lose everything. She told me to take your savings book and mortgage the house just for a few days, then pay it back. I was so stupid. I kept thinking just one more win would fix it all." Tui Trang immediately shouted, "Don't you dare blame me. Without me, you would be a penniless loudmouth your whole life. You love showing off to your mother, acting successful, and having relatives admire you. Now that you've lost, you're blaming your wife?" Quote. That statement struck right at the last bit of Bao's pride. He looked up at his wife, his eyes hollow. Perhaps at that moment he understood. The woman who always stood by him in stories of getting rich didn't believe in him, but wanted to use him like a ladder to climb up. When the ladder broke, she was ready to kick it away. I didn't let the argument drag on any longer. I looked at Bao and asked firmly, "Call the person holding the red book right now, ask clearly where they are, and who has the papers." Bao trembled as he held the phone. He dialed a few numbers but the other person didn't answer. He called several more times but it was just a long ringing tone. Finally, he let his hand drop, his face pale as a sheet. He didn't know Trang was the one who took the book. He only heard it was given to the broker to process an interest rate reduction. He had no idea where it was. I turned to Tui Trang. She stepped back half a step but still tried to maintain a defiant look. I already said I don't know. If you guys want to, go find it yourselves. Just then Javi spoke up, her voice light but strangely sober. Koi, does our house have a camera at the gate? Besides, there's a photo shop at the end of the alley. If Trang took the documents to copy, there must be footage. My father suddenly remembered something and said hurriedly, that's right, yesterday morning Trang said she was going to photocopy papers for Mom. She even asked me if there was any shop at the end of the alley that opened early. I stood up immediately. My father grabbed his coat and followed. Before leaving, I turned to tell Javi, stay here with Mom. If she tries to leave, call me right away. Javi nodded. My mother was still standing beside her, her eyes looking much more determined than before. She said softly, don't worry, I won't let her touch you again. My father and I ran to the photo shop near the end of the alley. The shop owner was a middle-aged man who recognized my father because they lived in the same neighborhood. Hearing us explain that home documents had been taken for unknown purposes, he was initially hesitant, but when my father mentioned it was the family's land deed, he immediately pulled up yesterday morning's camera footage. On the screen, the image appeared very clearly. Thuy Trang entered the shop, holding a large brown envelope in her hand. Walking beside her was a man in a black jacket with a tattoo on his wrist, the very same person standing outside our gate this morning. The two stood close to the counter, photocopied many pages, then the man took the envelope, and Thuy Trang looked around before leaving with him. I used my phone to record the camera footage, my heart pounding like a drum. My father stood beside me, his face deathly pale. He only said one sentence, she really gave it away. When we returned, Thuy Trang's expression changed the moment she saw the phone in my hand. I played the video in front of the whole family. There were no more excuses that could save her. My mother looked at the screen and then suddenly turned to Javi. Mom collapsed in front of my wife, her cries breaking out in pain. Quote, I was wrong. I'm not asking you to forgive me right away. I only ask that you don't let this house die in my hands. Javi panicked and leaned down to help her up. She was crying, but her voice remained clear. Quote, I'm not helping because I'm no longer angry. I am still angry, Mom. But I'm helping because if we let bad people win, this whole family will have no way back. Hearing those words, I felt my eyes sting. In the middle of a house that had just been through a storm, the person most hurt was the one keeping everything from collapsing completely. After the camera footage at the print shop was revealed to everyone, I understood that things had exceeded the limits of a family argument. This was no longer just a matter of a sister-in-law using sweet talk to win my mother over, nor was it just a matter of my brother's misplaced pride leading him into debt. The land deed had been taken, the loan documents had been signed, and creditors were already waiting at the gate. If we continued to handle this emotionally, one more wrong step could mean my parents losing the house they spent a lifetime saving for. I immediately called Dewey, an acquaintance who works as a civil legal consultant. I didn't ramble, I just clarified 3 things. My mother signed the papers without fully understanding their content. The property deed was taken by Thuy Trang without my father's clear consent. And a group of people is now threatening our family to demand money. The other end of the line was silent for a few seconds, then Dewey spoke firmly. Koi, the first step is to report the illegal possession of the property deed immediately. The second step is to write a statement about the guarantee signing process. Who said what? Who gave the papers, who witnessed it. Don't let them turn the family's silence into consent. I turned on the speakerphone so the whole family could hear. My mother sat in the chair, her hands trembling. She used to be someone who was very afraid of taking family matters outside. To her, saving face was sometimes more important than right or wrong. But now, hearing that if we don't report it in time they could use her own signature to pressure us. She bowed her head, her voice hoarse. I will sign the petition. I was wrong to trust the wrong person, so I must take responsibility. I took paper and wrote down the points Dewey instructed. My mother cried as she read. Every word in the report felt like a knife cutting into her self-respect. Because she listened to the eldest daughter-in-law, trusted high-profit investments, didn't read the papers carefully, and gave the deed to Thuy Trang to copy to lower interest rates. The more she wrote, the paler her face became. Bao also sat down at the table. At first, he was still shaking, unable to hold the pen steadily. I looked at him and said directly, Bao, from now on you must tell the whole truth. Hiding one loan or one transfer. Hiding one broker is like handing a knife to outsiders to stab the whole family. Stop trying to save face. Your pride isn't worth our parents' roof. Bao burst into tears. A man over 30 who used to brag everywhere about knowing this person. Knowing that person is now burying his head on the table like a child who committed a fault. He spoke through choked sobs. Koi, my whole life, I was afraid of losing to you. You don't talk much, but whatever you do is solid, while I am empty inside, so I have to show off. I was afraid mom would see me as inferior to you, afraid relatives would think I'm useless. In the end, you dragged the whole family into the mud. That statement made my father turn his face away. I saw his shoulders trembling, but he didn't scold him. Perhaps he understood that now is the time to let Bao see himself, not to add more insults. Javi stood still beside me. She was still angry. I knew the bruise on her cheek hadn't faded, and the wound in her heart couldn't heal in just a morning. Yet, when she saw my mother trembling so much she couldn't hold a glass of water, she quietly went to the kitchen. A moment later, Javi brought out a cup of warm ginger water and placed it in front of my mother. Quote, "Drink some, Mom, you're shivering all over." My mother looked up, staring at the cup and then at Javi. Her tears fell endlessly, her hands trembled as she took the cup, her voice choked. "Yesterday I slapped you, today you still bring me water. I've lived this long and still lost to you in kindness." Javi didn't say it was okay, nor was she quick to forgive to make things easier. She just replied very softly, "I am still hurt, Mom. But we must save the house first. We have plenty of time to reflect on right and wrong later." That sentence made the room go silent. It wasn't fake sweetness, nor was it cold-hearted. It had both boundaries and humanity. I looked at my wife, an indescribable gratitude rising within me. It was her composure that kept my family from falling apart further in this chaos. We thought everything had started to come under control. The report had been written. Bao also signed the statement regarding the loans and investment groups. My father gathered all the documents remaining in the house. I was preparing to take everyone to work with the authorities when my mother's phone suddenly rang incessantly. Not just one call, but many calls from relatives. As soon as my mother answered, the voice on the other end began shouting accusations. "Ms. Nock, why did you let your youngest daughter-in-law force you to sign the house sale papers? Does she want to throw you out on the street?" My mother was stunned. I checked my phone and saw a short clip spreading through the relatives group chat. The clip showed Javi standing in front of Thuy Trang at the living room door, but it was edited to cut the context, captioned with claims that the youngest daughter-in-law was the one trying to kick her mother-in-law out. Scolded just yesterday, yet back today to force her mother to sign papers and take the house. The person who released it was none other than Thuy Trang. She struck first, using the opinions of our relatives to hit my mother's greatest weakness: her pride. My mother held her phone, feeling both humiliated and confused. Outside the gate, the group of creditors had gathered in greater numbers. They were no longer just demanding money. They were threatening to post the loan documents online and ruin our family's name. My father stepped out to block the door. It was the first time in my life I heard him shout so loudly. Quote, "This family may be poor, but we won't sell out our daughter-in-law just to save face. People can say what they want, but no one will use an innocent person as a scapegoat." I looked at my father, then my mother, then at Bao and Javi. I understood that Thuy Trang was trying to divide us once again. If my mother turned to suspect Javi out of fear of our relatives, everything would collapse immediately. I slammed my phone onto the table and spoke every word clearly. Quote, "From now on, anyone who hides half the truth is practically handing outsiders a knife to stab us. If we want to keep the house and our honor, the whole family must stand on the same side. There's no turning back." I decided to go with Javi. My parents and brother Bao went to the meeting spot to see the group holding the land deed. But this time, we didn't go empty-handed. Our phones were fully charged to record the audio. A small camera was prepared in my pocket, and Dewey promised to send a witness to follow us from a distance. My once fractured family, after so much bitterness, was finally forced to stand on the same front line. As for Thuy Trang, from the moment she released that clip, she officially revealed herself as someone willing to destroy the whole family to save herself. The meeting point Tin Cent was a small cafe on the edge of a residential area, about a 10-minute drive from my parents' house. The shop was tucked behind some old kiosks, with a low corrugated iron roof and faded plastic tables and chairs. It was empty at midday, which made the atmosphere feel even more oppressive. Before stepping out of the car, I turned to look at my whole family. My mother sat in the back seat, gripping her bag tightly, her face pale. My father remained silent, while my brother hung his head, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. I spoke slowly, reminding everyone not to lose their temper today. We are here to gather evidence, not to fight. Even if they say something unpleasant, we must hold our tongues. A single moment of losing composure could turn us from the victims into the ones at fault. Javi sat beside me, quietly double-checking her phone. She had already turned on the recording mode, with the screen facing down in her bag. I also messaged Fuck beforehand, the witness whom Dewey introduced to us. He would sit at the next table pretending to have tea, but close enough to hear and see everything. Javi turned to my mother, gently placing her hand on hers. Just tell the truth, Mom. Whatever they ask, answer only what you know to be true. Leave the rest to us. My mother looked at Javi, her lips trembling. Perhaps she wanted to apologize once more, but in the end, she only nodded. In the midst of this crisis, the person she once hurt was the first to reassure her. That irony left my mother unable to keep her head held high for long. We walked into the cafe. Tin was already sitting at a table in the corner. Beside him were the two men who had stood outside our gate. He was in his 40s, dark-skinned, with small eyes and a thick silver chain around his neck. He didn't seem too loud, but every gesture carried the air of someone used to using intimidation to instill fear. Seeing us, Tin smirked. What a full house. I thought your family had gone into hiding. I pulled out a chair to sit, placing my phone in front of me with the screen off. We're here to talk clearly. You are holding my parents' house papers, aren't you? Tin pulled a photocopy of the red book from his bag and tapped on it. Whether I hold the original or the copy doesn't matter. What matters is that your family owes money. 800 million today, or else that house will be handled our way. My mother trembled, but Javi gently held her hand under the table. I looked straight at Tin. Under what contract are you holding my family's house papers? Who gave you the original? Did my father sign a power of attorney? Does my mother have a written agreement to use the house as collateral for the loan? Tin paused slightly. He didn't expect me to ask straight about the documents instead of begging or bargaining. He glanced at Bao and said vaguely, if it came from family, what more is there to ask? The daughter-in-law brought it, and your mother knew about it, so don't try to claim you're uninvolved now. Just then, the sound of high heels clicking rapidly against the concrete rang out from outside the cafe. Thuy Trang appeared, wearing sunglasses and a cream coat, still trying to look elegant despite the clear tension on her face. As soon as she saw us, she immediately raised her voice. Oh, so the whole family dragged themselves here to set me up and humiliate me? You're quite something, Koi. Yesterday you played the part of a dutiful son, today you've dragged your parents out in front of outsiders. I didn't argue back. I took the statement my mother had signed out of the folder and placed it on the table. Then I played the video from the copy shop, turning the screen toward Tin and Thuy Trang. In the video, the image of her holding the envelope of documents while with Tin was very clear. Thuy Trang's face turned pale. Her sunglasses couldn't hide the panic in her eyes. Tin frowned as well, turning to look at her with an annoyed expression. I asked, you said you didn't know where the red book was. Then who is that in the video? Thuy Trang swallowed hard and immediately changed her tone. I was just helping Mom take out a temporary loan. Mom agreed to it at the time. I had no intention of stealing anything. The family is struggling. I was looking out for everyone, and now you all turn around and bite me. Javi spoke up then, her voice not loud but clear enough for the next table to hear. If you were just helping Mom, why did you text asking if I'd gotten the red book yet this evening? If you were just helping Mom, why didn't you tell Dad? Why didn't you tell Koi? Why did you go with Tin while the rest of the family knew nothing about it? Thuy Trang was speechless. Tin began to lose his patience. He slammed his hand on the table, lowering his voice but full of frustration. Ms. Trang, you told me everyone in your family agreed to these papers, so why is it now coming out that your family isn't in agreement? I don't have time to get caught up in your family's deception. I looked at Tin and spoke slowly. All the evidence has been sent to our legal counsel. If the documents aren't returned today, we will immediately report the illegal withholding of property deeds and the signs of coercing an elderly person into signing a guarantee they didn't understand. How you conduct your business is your affair, but don't drag my family into your fraudulent records. Tin looked at me for a few seconds. Perhaps he realized we were no longer the panicked people who were easily intimidated. He muttered a curse, then pulled a brown envelope from his bag and threw it onto the table. Quote, fine, handle it yourselves. Don't drag me down with you. My mother looked at the envelope, tears welling up in her eyes. My father hurriedly opened it to check. It was indeed the original property deed, but before we could breathe a sigh of relief, Thuy Trang suddenly lunged forward, not for the envelope, but to grab Havi's bag. She knew there was a phone inside recording the conversation. Havi was pulled off balance and hit the edge of the table. I jumped up, but my mother was a beat faster. She rushed over to shield Havi, screaming with all her indignation. Quote, "You've already deceived me, and now you want to hurt V too?" My mother's scream echoed through the quiet cafe. Thuy Trang froze, her hand still gripping the bag strap, her face deathly pale. For the first time, the mother who had been led by the nose by her had fully sided with Havi. And from that very moment, I knew Thuy Trang's act had truly reached its final curtain call. Before I could even snatch the bag back, Mr. Fuck, the witness at the next table, stood up abruptly. He stepped forward, his voice firm. Quote, "I clearly saw this woman lunge and snatch the bag first. If you need me to, I can testify." That statement made Thuy Trang's hand go rigid on the bag strap. Havi had been pulled sideways, her elbow scraping against the plastic table edge, leaving a red, bleeding scratch. I rushed to help my wife sit down to check the injury. It luckily wasn't serious, but the mere fact that she dared to strike in a public place showed that Thuy Trang could no longer keep up her last mask. I looked up at her. "You've just turned yourself from a person of interest into a direct perpetrator." Thuy Trang gasped, her eyes darting quickly past Fuck and Tin before landing on Bao. Perhaps she understood that before so many people, the more she denied, the more she exposed herself, but Thuy Trang was not the type to give in easily. In the blink of an eye, she switched to her familiar pitiful expression. She dropped her handbag and whipped around toward her husband. Tears fell very quickly. Quote, "Bao, look, your whole family is ganging up to bully me. I've been running around trying to scrape money together for this family. Now that something's wrong, everyone is dumping the blame on me. Are you just going to stand there and watch them mock me?" Bao stood still like a statue. In the past, just a hint of tears from Thuy Trang would have him rushing to defend his wife. But this time, the red book they had just recovered was right before him. The footage from the copy shop, the texts about getting the red book, and that bag snatching incident just now. These things were no longer just rumors or feelings. They were the truth laid bare before his eyes. Seeing Bao silent, Thuy Trang's voice immediately sharpened. Quote, "Are you mute now? Or do you actually believe I could harm your family? If you think I'm that evil, then let's get a divorce. I will blast all your debt issues online for everyone to see. I'll let your friends, relatives, and colleagues know what kind of incompetent man you are, investing stupidly and then blaming your wife." Bao trembled. I saw his hands clench into fists and then loosen. For years he lived for his pride. He feared nothing more than people knowing he was hollow. Thuy Trang understood that, which is why she used that very fear to control him. But perhaps when a person has been pushed to the bottom, they no longer have much left to lose. Bao lifted his head, his voice raspy, but this time he did not shy away. Quote, "Trang, I was wrong for being greedy, wrong for my pride, wrong for wanting to prove I was smart without properly learning anything. But you were wrong for turning those mistakes into a trap for this entire family. You knew my mother trusted you, so you played up to her. You knew I was afraid of losing face, so you forced me to borrow more. You knew we still had the red book, so you found a way to take it. Even now, you still won't admit a single thing." Thuy Trang froze for a few seconds, then let out a scoff. That smile was so cold it made my mother shudder. "You talk a big game, don't you? Without me, you'd just be a penniless braggart for the rest of your life. In front of Mom, you brag about big business deals, but behind her back, you're counting every penny for coffee. I was just helping you live the charade you wanted. Now that it's fallen apart, you turn around and blame me." My mother burst into tears. She clutched her chest and stumbled back into my father's arms. The eldest daughter-in-law she was once so proud of, the one she used to compare Havi to. Turns out, she never truly considered this house her home. In Thuy Trang's eyes, my mother was just a gullible old lady. You were just a shadow of pride, and we were the obstacles that needed clearing away. I stepped up to my brother and lowered my voice. "You heard that clearly enough. Do you still intend to hide anything for her? If you want to make things right, you must write a full report yourself. Which loans were taken? Who introduced them? Who took the money? Who signed the papers? Write it all down. Don't let shame stop you from exposing someone who was ready to drag this whole family into the gutter." Brother Bao hung his head. His eyes were bloodshot. He looked at Havi, then at Mom and Dad. For the first time, I saw him stop trying to save face. He was left with only the exhaustion of someone who just realized the price of his boasting. Javi sat next to my mother, one hand still clutching her scraped elbow. She said softly, "Bao, admitting your mistake isn't about making the family look down on you. It's about finding a way to start over. If you keep hiding things today, Mom and Dad will continue to suffer the most." That sentence made him collapse. He slumped into a plastic chair, covering his face with his hands, then stood up and bowed before my parents. "I apologize to you both. I was foolish and greedy, and I let my wife drag you into debt. And I was too proud to tell the truth." He turned to me, coy. "I apologize to you. For years I thought your silence meant you were inferior to me, but now I know that those who live with integrity don't need to show off." Finally, he looked at Javi for a long time, his voice choking. "V, I apologize. Last night I let my wife insult you, and I sat there preaching morals while you were the one being wronged. I'm not asking for your immediate forgiveness, but I am asking to take responsibility." Javi replied quickly, offering only a very slight nod. "I've heard you. As for forgiveness, let time decide. For now, we need to handle family matters." My mother turned to Javi then, her hands trembling as she reached for hers, afraid to grip too tightly for fear of being pulled away. I used to think Heen was easy to push around. Now I realize that having a daughter-in-law with self-respect is a blessing for this family. "I have done you such a great wrong." Javi lowered her eyes. Her silence wasn't coldness, but the necessary pause for someone who has been hurt. I was glad she didn't force herself to forgive right away just to put others at ease. Kindness without boundaries eventually becomes an excuse for others to keep hurting you. Thuy Trang watched the scene, her face darkening. Seeing that no one was on her side anymore, she grabbed her bag and backed away from the table. Before turning to leave, she gritted her teeth and said, "Do you think getting the deed back is the end of it? I won't let any of you have peace. Don't forget, if this debt issue comes out, it won't look very good for your family either." Saying that, she left quickly. I didn't chase after her. People like Thuy Trang, once they lose their footing, usually try one last desperate strike. The more rash they are, the easier they fall into a trap. I simply turned to Brother Fuck, asking him to confirm what he had witnessed, and saved all the recordings in 3 different places. I looked at my whole family and made it clear that from now on, we won't negotiate privately anymore. We are going to the authorities. When someone has lost all boundaries, don't expect them to stop out of sentiment. My father nodded. My mother wiped away her tears. Brother Bao held the unfinished statement. For the first time, he followed me willingly without hiding. As for Javi, she walked beside me, quiet but steady. I know there are still storms ahead, but at least from that moment on, my family stopped turning our backs on each other. That very night, when we had just returned from the authorities and thought the whole family could finally sit down and catch our breath, my mother's phone suddenly rang incessantly. It wasn't just 1 or 2 calls, but dozens from our aunts, uncles, and cousins on my father's side. The screen lit up with one name after another, accompanied by short messages that hit like stones thrown in our faces. Quote, "Ms. Nok, why are you letting your youngest daughter-in-law force you to sign papers to take over the house? Koi abandoned his mother in times of trouble, and now he's back to play the savior of the family. The family is in chaos. Why are you letting his wife run wild like that?" My mother held the phone, her face deathly pale. She opened the family group chat, her hands trembling so much she almost dropped the device. A short clip was being shared repeatedly. In the clip, Javi stands in front of the living room door, sternly telling Thuy Trang, "You can go wherever you want, but the house deed must stay here." Immediately after that was a scene of my mother sitting and signing a written statement. But the entire beginning and the end, the part where Thuy Trang took the deed and left with Tin, and the part where my mother admitted to being deceived were all completely cut out. The caption attached to the clip was even more vicious. Quote, "The youngest daughter-in-law, who was scolded by her mother-in-law the day before, comes back the next day with her husband to force the mother to sign papers and seize the house. Life today is truly terrifying." I knew it was Thuy Trang the moment I saw it. That style of editing was all too familiar. She didn't need to prove anything. She just needed to plant doubt in my mother's weakest spot. Her pride in front of the relatives. My mother has spent her whole life fearing the judgment of others. Now, Thuy Trang is striking at that very fear to pull her back into a defensive state. My mother slumped onto the chair, her eyes vacant. Quote, "Koi, maybe that's enough, let me just stay silent. The more we speak, the more they laugh. I've lived this long, and now being shamed by relatives like this, I just can't take it." I was about to speak up, but Javi placed her hand on my mother's. Her face still looked tired, the bruise on her cheek hadn't faded, but her voice was very gentle. Quote, "The more you stay silent, the more room you give the liar to thrive. You don't need to justify things for me, you just need to tell the truth. We accept our mistakes where they happened, but we won't bear the blame for things that aren't ours." My mother looked at Javi, her eyes red-rimmed, lips trembling, but she couldn't speak. I knew in her heart she was feeling both ashamed and regretful at that moment. The person she once drove away to her parents' home was now the one teaching her how to stand tall against slander. I pulled up a chair to sit beside my mother and said slowly, "Mom, don't play the victim, and don't insult Thuy Trang. Just tell the truth and admit your own mistakes. The relatives might not forgive you right away, but at least they will know who is distorting the truth." My mother was silent for a long time, then she nodded. She didn't dare to record a video because her face looked too haggard. She only asked to record audio. I opened my phone and placed it in front of her. She took a deep breath, her hands still shaking, but her voice when she spoke was clearer than I expected. Quote, "To all my relatives, this is Nok. My family's business today has been so noisy that everyone has had to hear unpleasant things. I am very ashamed, but I cannot remain silent anymore. The person at fault first is me. I favored the wrong person, slapped a decent daughter-in-law, and let a flatterer lead me by the nose." At this point, my mother choked up. Javi handed her a glass of warm water. Mom took a sip and continued, "Khối and V have been quietly sending money to take care of Mr. Lam and me for years. Money for medicine and house repairs. They covered many expenses. But I was foolish. I listened to Thuy Trang's sweet talk, thinking she was the filial one. I insulted V and even slapped her during a meal. I admit that mistake to all our relatives. I don't blame anyone else." In the family group chat, people started sending ellipses and then went silent. My mother continued to explain clearly how Thuy Trang had taken the red deed under the guise of copying documents to reduce interest. After that, the documents fell into the hands of a loan shark group. She made it clear that the family had video footage from the copy shop, text messages, and witnesses. She also emphasized that Javi did not force her to sign any papers to seize the house. On the contrary, it was Javi who advised her to tell the truth and keep the house for her parents. When the recording was sent, the room went deathly silent. A few minutes later, the first messages in the family group chat began to change their tone. A relative message that if what Mrs. Knox said was true, then Trang went too far. Another woman wrote, "You were slapped but still helped your in-laws. That shows true kindness and loyalty." Those who had called to scold my mother earlier fell silent one by one. Some even sent private messages apologizing for hearing only one side. My mother read those messages, tears falling onto the screen. Not because she was defended, but because she finally dared to expose her own mistakes to everyone. That realization was painful, but it made her feel lighter. Thuy Trang must have read those messages as well. Less than half an hour later, Bao received a bank notification for a large withdrawal request from their joint account. He turned pale and opened the app to check. Besides that, the wedding gold in their small safe had also been cleaned out. The motorcycle registered in his name had just been listed for urgent sale in a second-hand group. Bao looked at me, his voice trembling. "She's really planning to run." This time, he didn't panic uselessly. He immediately called the bank's hotline, requesting a temporary freeze on the joint account due to property disputes and suspected suspicious transactions. Afterward, he took screenshots of all the notifications. He saved the recording of the call with the hotline. I looked at him and saw, in the eyes of my brother who used to be obsessed with saving face, a belated clarity. He said to me, "Khối, I'm not asking you to save me from the consequences. I only ask to fix what I've caused myself. From now on, whatever papers need signing or statements need making, I will do it myself. My debts, I will pay. I won't let Mom, Dad, and you carry them anymore." I nodded. "I'll help you follow the right process, but remember, you have to pay your debts with your own labor. No one will pay for your ego anymore." Bao bowed his head and replied softly, "I understand." Right at that moment, Bao's phone rang. It was Thuy Trang. He put it on speaker. On the other end, her voice was no longer spoiled or tearful. It was furious. Quote, "You froze the account, didn't you? You think doing that will force me? If I don't have the money to pay, the loan sharks will come after your whole family. Don't blame me for being cruel." Bao gripped the phone tightly but didn't curse back. "I just said, Trang, you chose this path yourself. Don't drag anyone else down with you." Thuy Trang gave a cold laugh and hung up. A moment later, he received another message from an unknown number. telling his wife to pay up or face the consequences. I looked at the screen, my heart sinking. Thuy Trang, blocked from withdrawing her money, had angrily called Tin's group to put pressure on my family. But she didn't understand that once those greedy people were involved, they might not turn on us first. It is very likely that she will be the one caught in her own trap first. As the threatening message from the unknown number appeared, Bao slumped into his chair. No longer panicked or loud, he just stared silently at the screen. His eyes were bloodshot. Perhaps it was then that he realized those who used to pat his shoulder and call him a smart investor, or called him bold and courageous, actually just saw him as prey. When there was money, they were sweet talkers. When the cash flow stopped, they immediately turned to strangle him. I took Bao's phone to capture all the messages and said, "From now on, no one is to message them privately anymore. Keep everything documented. People who use threats to demand money cannot be dealt with through fear." Bao nodded. My mother sat nearby, her hand still clutching her chest. Javi quietly poured a cup of warm water and placed it in front of her. She didn't offer many comforting words, but that small gesture was enough to make my mother bow her head and weep. I know my wife hasn't forgotten that slap from the other day, but she still maintains her compassion when others are in distress, which makes me love her even more. The next morning, we received a formal invitation to come in and provide additional information. Not only my family, but both Tin and Thuy Trang were also summoned. While in the car, my mother gripped her fabric bag on her lap, which contained her handwritten statement and related documents. She turned to Javi, her voice barely a whisper. "V, later if I get too nervous, can you remind me what to say?" Javi looked at her for a moment and nodded. "Just tell them exactly what happened, Mom. I won't speak for you, Mom, but I will sit by your side." That statement was perfectly measured. It wasn't an easy forgiveness, but it wasn't a cold cutting off either. It was like a hand placed on one's back, not pushing, not pulling, just letting the trembling person know they weren't being left behind. At the office, Thuy Trang had already arrived. She wore a white shirt, her hair tied neatly, and wore light makeup as if trying to regain her usual demure look. As soon as she saw my mother, she stood up immediately, her eyes red-rimmed. Quote, "Mom, please speak for me. I really didn't mean to hurt our family, I just wanted to get through a rough patch." I looked at my mother, her hands were visibly trembling. If this were a few days ago, she surely would have softened. But today, my mother just stared at Thuy Trang for a long time before slowly sitting down. She didn't shout or scold, she just spoke in a hoarse voice. Quote, "I loved you, which is why I was blind, but to love you wrongly once more would be to ruin my whole family." Thuy Trang froze. The sweet word, "Mom," she had used for so long failed to open the door to pity for the first time. The meeting began, and my mother recounted the entire process of how Thuy Trang gave her papers to sign. She claimed they were asset verification papers to lower interest, promising to pay back once the money came through. She spoke of the moment she trusted her eldest daughter-in-law, handing over the property deed for Thuy Trang to copy. At that point, she burst into tears, admitting she was blinded by sweet words and pride in having a capable daughter-in-law, almost losing the whole house. "I am wrong, but I didn't know those papers were used for usury, nor did I know she took the deed and gave it to strangers." Javi sat nearby, quietly handing her a tissue. She didn't interrupt, add details, or compete for anyone's sympathy. That very silence made my mother's account carry even more weight. Listeners could clearly see that Javi was not trying to play the victim in front of everyone. She simply let the truth speak for itself. When it was my brother's turn, he no longer dodged the truth. He admitted his ignorance, having been blinded by promises of high returns and then borrowing more to try and make it back. He also clarified that Thuy Trang repeatedly pressured him to borrow money from his mother, using the family's reputation as a guarantee, and even promised that if they secured a large amount, she would give the brokers a cut. His voice was shaking, but every sentence was clear. "My share of the fault, I accept. I will cooperate to resolve this and pay the amounts that are my responsibility. But I want to make it clear, my parents did not understand the content of the papers they signed. My wife exploited my mother's trust to obtain the house documents." Tin sat on the other side. At first, he was defiant, but when the officer presented printouts of the messages between him and Thuy Trang, his expression changed. In the messages, Thuy Trang proactively promised to hand over the title deed, saying her mother-in-law was easy to persuade, and her husband needed money to cover his losses, so he would go along with it. There was a part where she messaged very clearly, "Leave the paperwork to me. When the money comes, we'll split the fees first, and I'll handle my husband's family later." The room went silent when that message was read aloud. Thuy Trang turned pale and stammered, "No, at that time I was just saying things to finish the conversation. I didn't mean it that way." But everything matched up. The messages, the videos, the copy shop, the recording at the cafe, my mother's statement, Mr. Bao's testimony, and even Thuy Trang's attempt to withdraw money and flee. The seemingly disconnected pieces had finally formed a very clear picture. Tin did not escape either. Through the investigation, his group was found to have many signs of lending at abnormal interest rates and using threatening language to exert mental pressure. When hearing the officer demand clarification on other transactions, the defiance on his face vanished. He turned to look at Thuy Trang with a furious glare, as if she were the one who had dragged him into the mud. Thuy Trang began to truly panic. She burst into tears and turned to my mother, her voice as sweet as it once was. "Mom, I know I was wrong. Please say a word for me, Mom. After all, I used to be your daughter-in-law. I used to take care of you." My mother closed her eyes, tears streaming down, but when she opened them, her voice was more resolute than ever. "You took care of me with Khoi's money and Vis labor, then used my trust to pawn the property deed. That's not called taking care of someone, that's digging a hole for the whole family." Thuy Trang collapsed into the chair. For the first time, she had no words left to argue. The case file was established in accordance with regulations. Deceptive acts during the loan process, the withholding of documents, and pressuring others to sign as guarantors were all recorded for further processing. Bao also filed for divorce, without noise or insults, signing with a shaking but firm hand. As we walked out of the office, the afternoon sun cast a pale light on the courtyard. My mother walked slowly. Javi kept a half-step distance beside her in case she felt dizzy, while Bao stood next to me, his eyes fixed on the tiles. I said softly, "There are prices that are very painful to pay, brother, but they must be paid so we can have a clean path to continue living." Bao nodded without replying, while I looked toward Thuy Trang, who was being kept for further questioning. In my heart, there was no noisy gloating, only a very clear feeling that those who try to use others' property deeds as an escape route eventually drag themselves into the clutches of the law. You reap what you sow, and the day of harvest will always come. After that session, my parents' house was not lost. The property deed was kept in a new safe. This time, the key was no longer lying carelessly in the old drawer like before. But just because the house was saved didn't mean everything was immediately peaceful. The real debt was still there. Bao's portion of the responsibility could not be erased by just a few tears of regret. I told him directly, "I will help you handle this through the proper process, but I will not pay it all off for you. If I pay it for you, you will be debt-free today, but you will never learn how to stand on your own 2 feet." After hearing that, Bao just lowered his head. This time, he wasn't offended, and he didn't get angry. He sold the expensive motorcycle he had bought for vanity, cut all unnecessary expenses, and took a warehouse job at a small workshop owned by an acquaintance. The job wasn't flashy, and the salary wasn't as high as he used to brag about, but it was steady and honest. One evening, he called me, his voice sounding much lighter. "Khoi, for the first time, I feel relieved not having to pretend to be rich anymore. Being a little poor but sleeping well, it turns out, it's not so bad." Hearing those words, my heart suddenly sank. People sometimes don't die from a lack of money, but fade away from trying to live in a shell that isn't their own. He said he took a very painful detour to understand that, but at least he turned back in time. My mother changed too. She no longer tells the neighbors what her daughters-in-law bought or gifted her. The silk scarves, boxes of pastries, and gifts she once boasted about suddenly lost their appeal. She began focusing on genuine deeds and sincere hearts instead of sweet words. Once, when I came home, I saw her meticulously writing down every amount my wife and I had sent her before. I told her there was no need to do that. She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "I'm not writing this to pay it all back. I'm writing it to remember who I was ungrateful to." One weekend evening, Mom called asking me to come home for dinner. Her voice on the phone was hesitant, no longer carrying that commanding tone from before. She asked, "If V doesn't mind, bring your wife over to have dinner with your father and me. I'm making sour fish soup, the dish she said she liked the other day." I turned to Javi. She was silent for a moment, then nodded. I understood that this nod didn't mean all wounds had healed, It just meant she was open enough to give a chance, without forgetting to set boundaries for herself. That meal was very different. There were no more comparisons, no more flattering laughter from Thuy Trang, and no more showing off from Bao. The meal was simple. A bowl of sour soup, a plate of boiled vegetables, some braised fish, and a dish of ginger fish sauce. My mother personally ladled the soup and placed it in front of Javi. She looked at my wife, her voice choking. "The other day I told you to go back to your parents, today I invite you home, if you'll still give me a chance." Javi held her chopsticks, her eyes slightly red. She didn't rush to smile, nor did she offer generous words just to please everyone. She just replied softly, "I am still hurt, Mom. But I also want everyone to live more kindly. If you truly change in the future, I will see it." My mother nodded repeatedly. My father sat beside me, letting out a very deep sigh. He raised his glass, looked at Javi, and said, "I am also to blame. I stayed silent for too long." Adults often think staying quiet keeps the peace, but it turns out that silence only lets the wrong grow. "I apologize to you." Javi bowed her head. I felt her hand gently squeeze mine under the table. The atmosphere wasn't exactly happy, but it was very real. Some families can't go back to how they were after a crisis, but if everyone is honest enough, they can start over in a kinder way. Bao also arrived a little late, wearing a dark blue worker's shirt, his face tanned by the sun. He placed a small bag of oranges on the table, shyly saying he bought them with his first paycheck from the factory. Then he stood before Javi and bowed his head very low. Quote, "I apologize to you once more. If you hadn't been insulted that day, if Uncle Koi hadn't taken you away, perhaps the whole family would still be in the dark. I don't expect you to forget right away. I only hope to live more decently from now on so you'll hate me less." Javi looked at him and said softly, "I don't need you to say much. Live well with our parents, pay off your debts with your own hard work, and that is enough." As for Thuy Trang, she eventually had to face the consequences she brought upon herself. Her marriage to Bao ended, and her fraudulent actions regarding documents, loans, and dragging lenders in to pressure my family were all handled according to the law. Tin's group no longer dared to come to the house to threaten us, as they were under investigation for other irregular loan activities. The person who once wanted to use my parents' house as an escape route ultimately locked herself in inescapable trouble. After everything, Javi still keeps a reasonable distance from my family. She visits my parents occasionally, buys medicine when she hears my mother cough, and reminds me to call and check on my father, but she no longer lets anyone mistake her kindness for weakness. My mother understands this too. She doesn't demand that her daughter-in-law forgive and forget immediately, but quietly makes amends bit by bit, from her words and tone to the way she treats others. As for me, I realize that family is not a place where the person in the right must constantly endure just to keep the peace. Family is not a place where those who are wrong can simply cry to be forgiven. A true family is where those who are wrong know how to bow their heads and make amends. The hurt have the right to set boundaries, and those with a conscience will work together to break free from the wrong. That slap at dinner seemed to break everything apart, but sometimes a crack is what reveals the rot hidden for too long. If you sow schemes like Thuy Trang, you will reap loneliness. He said if you sow vanity, you must pay for it with sweat. After a painful fall, my mother finally understood that a kind daughter-in-law doesn't have to be sweet, as long as she doesn't turn her back in times of trouble. And after everything, my spouse and I learned how to care for others without losing ourselves.